Hi, thank you for joining us. This is a series of videos for the Center for Advanced Studies in Child Welfare at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities campus. Today we're welcoming Ms. Bobbi Jo Potter of St. Louis County, and she is going to tell us a little bit about why she got into the child welfare field. So I'll ask you a few questions, Bobbi.
Okay.
Why did you become committed to Indian child welfare?
I think I became committed to Indian Child Welfare because it's the community that I come from, and so for me it's very important that I give back to my community in whatever ways that I can. And I didn't go to school thinking like, oh, I'm going to be a social worker and I'm going to work in Indian Child Welfare. I think it was something that was on my journey and that I meant to do, and we found our way, we connected, and that's where I am now, and I'm very passionate about it.
Thank you. What led to your involvement in working to improve child welfare systems for Native families?
Can you read that again?
Yeah. What led to your involvement in working to improve overall child welfare systems for Native families?
Okay, so when I had first started off in my social work career, I started off wanting to be a nurse, learned that needles aren't my thing, and so I had to find something else to do, and I had attended a social work generalist class. And I was like, yeah, this makes sense, this is what I'm going to do. So I didn't even know that child protection or Indian child welfare even existed at that time. So I started off in the field. I got a job here at St. Louis County, and I was doing regular ongoing child protection case management. And I had heard about the Indian Child Welfare Unit, and at that time I didn't feel like I was ready for that because there was some identity stuff that I needed to work through, feeling whether I could do that. I wasn't really connected to my culture. Would my community accept me here since I grew up in another state? So I just felt I wasn't ready for that, and I needed to learn the work before I jumped into that. So I did that for a few years, and then I started doing the adoption work here at the county, and I excelled in that, but what I learned through doing that work is that it really, to me, felt like the boarding school era of my generation, because there were so many children that were children of color. So I'm a big advocate for American Indian children, but also just children of color. And there were lots of children being adopted into white homes that really, when I was interviewing them, had no plan to keep those children connected to their culture in any way. They weren't guided. We as a system weren't connecting the foster parents with resources. It wasn't really a priority for us to be working with children in that way. And at one point, there was a family that had said to me, it was a little boy, he was about 6, he was American Indian, grew up in his biological home for the first 6 years of his life, and I had asked them, what do you plan to do to keep this child connected to your culture, or to his culture? And they said, well, he's taken on our cultural and religious beliefs. And I, at that point, I was like, I need to get out of here. I can't do this anymore. I don't want to be a part of this. It just didn't sit right with my value system. So at that point, then I realized maybe it's time, I'm ready. I had gone through the MSW program at UMD, and through there I got connected to some cultural things, and that's kind of what sparked me into learning more about my culture and getting connected in that way. So I was like, you know what, I think I'm ready, and I really want to have an impact, and so I thought front end work was going to be where I could have the most impact. And I started doing that, so I was on the front ends investigating, going out, frontline calls are made, I'm going out interviewing families, asking about, the concerns that were brought forward, and just throughout this whole process really noticing how this system is really broken and set up to do exactly what it is doing, and so then I got into really learning that, I want to do micro work, but macro work is where it's at, and I got to get into policies, and I got to learn that stuff, even though in college I was like, I don't want anything to do with that. So that's where I'm at now, and I figured I was going to do that work for a while. And the deeper I got into it and learning about policies, it was as a line worker, I didn't really have that big of an impact on that. I wasn't a part of the meetings where those things were being discussed, and I felt that I should apply to be a supervisor so that I could be around that table, so that my community could be at that table and have a say in the policies that are going to be impacting. And so I guess in short, long, that's why.
And I think you're doing a great job at that.
Thank you.
What do you think are the most important things that child protection systems should know about working with Native families?
I think one of the most important things that the system should know is that our community doesn't function on your timelines. It's just time is a construct that was brought to our community, and that's not something that we go by. So when things happen, they happen when they're supposed to happen. And so trying to fit us into the system's timelines of, you got to have kids they're in their permanent placements or adopted out or in a transfer of custody within 24 months of being placed. So that's from the time of removal to permanency. That's 24 months. And our community they're overcoming, addiction. They're all of that is spurred by historical trauma that has happened for generations upon generations and generations. And that's not something that can be fixed in those really short timelines. Also, we've got 6 months in, we've got to be thinking about a permanency plan for our children. And again, that's just not enough time for our families to heal from the trauma that this government has placed upon them. And it's not enough time for the government. We're obligated to then give back what we've taken from them. And a lot of that is parenting skills, grief and healing, how to handle emotions. Really in the boarding school era, what was given to our families was physical abuse, sexual abuse, and so that's what our parents know, and they're healing from that. And so then they're trying to do that, they're trying to parent their kids in the way that they know how, and that's we've got to correct that as a government. That it's our obligation to give back what we took, and we've got a long way to go before we're going to really see some really good outcomes and some families that are really healthy.
Beautifully said. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
The final question for this piece. What do you think are the most important things that child protection social workers should know about working with Native families?
I think the most important thing, I feel like there's a lot, but if I had to really pick one out, it's not about you. It's about the families. It's about the children. It's about the community. And so if you're coming into this work and you're not from the community, it's going to be really important for you to understand that and not place your values or your beliefs onto the families that you're working with. It also is going to require a lot of self-reflection, so you're going to have the ability to be open and understanding what your biases are and how they may impact the decisions that you make, and be willing to hear that feedback. One thing I notice is lots of people struggle with hearing that feedback. They get defensive right away, and there's really no place for that in this work, because your decisions, when coming from your lens, impact our families. And if you look at the disproportionality, our families are 25% more likely the children to be placed in out-of-home care, and that's unacceptable. And you just really need to be open to learning, being humble, and not get into power struggles, because again, it's not about you. And if you're making decisions based out of your frustration that a family isn't engaging with you and needing to have that power over, that you're not going to get anywhere, and you're going to have negative impacts on our community.
Thank you.
Yes.
That was the last question for this segment. Thank you very much, Bobbi Jo.